Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I'm an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure to check in the description below where you will find links to all of my social media outlets, including how to join the Watch Barbara Knit Facebook group, where to find my patterns online so you can knit them up for yourself, and how to support me on Patreon. Today for you, I thought we would have a lot of fun with something that's going to involve a little audience participation. And by audience participation, I mean, hopefully you will be commenting below. In the last video, it was so much fun getting a lot of responses from y'all based on where you fell on the process to project spectrum. I'll link to that video in case you missed it. It was amazing discussion in the comments, and I thought it'd be fun to play something. It's sort of like a little game. So what I'm calling this is the secret language of knitting or knitters. And as with all specialized activities, knitting has its own lingo that if you're new to knitting, you might not know what all of these terms mean. And even if you're experienced in knitting, you might not have come across, but they're things that we use with each other that most of us, or people who've been knitting for a while, know, but anyone listening to us might be like, what in the world are they talking about? Because some are words that aren't even used in other contexts, and some are words that we use in a different context. And a lot of them are acronyms. Knitters love acronyms. Don't know why. Two things that knitters love: acronyms, and based on the names of different yarn stores and yarn companies I've seen, puns. Knitters like acronyms, knitters like puns. Maybe I'll do a whole video on knitting puns. Get y'all to submit your favorite punny names of companies and stores, because I've run into a bunch of them. But the way this is going to work is I came up with 10 because it's a nice round number. There are many more that we could do, but I just thought 10 lingo type words that knitters use, and I want to talk about briefly what each one means. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the word up on the screen, and I want you to think about what it means in the context of knitting. And then I'm going to talk about it, and if you got it right, if you knew what it was, I want to give yourself a point. And then at the end, see how many you knew in total. I bet a lot of you get 10 out of 10, but it'll be fun to see if there are any words that are new to you, any terms that are new to you, or if you're a newer knitter, this is going to give you a jump start on getting to know the lingo so that you can talk with all of your knitter friends like you've been knitting for years. So we are going to go ahead and start with this one. Cake. Everybody knows what cake is, right? Well, in the knitting parlance, a cake is actually this. This is a cake. It is a cake of yarn because it is vaguely cake shaped. Actually, I have no idea why they call this a cake. I mean, I guess some cakes are round, but this is, yarns come in skeins or hanks, which both could have been on this list, but they come in a form that you can't knit directly from. Now, some yarn does come in a ball or a log that you can knit directly from, but a lot of them come in a skein. I probably have one stuffed around here someplace. Here's one. You can't knit from this. If you try to, you will make a giant mess. You have to wind this from this into this so that you can knit from it. I usually knit from the outside, but you can also center pull from your cake of yarn. So that is word number 1. If you got it right, if you knew what it was, give yourself a little check mark on whatever little cheater piece of paper you're using, or you could just hold up your fingers because there's only 10. So if you got one finger up, you go. Okay, next one. Block. It's a common enough word. You use it. You can block someone's shot in basketball. You could block someone from getting out of a door. But in knitting, to block means something very different. To block or blocking is to take a finished piece and to dampen it or steam it or spray it in some way, pin it out to its final size, and then allow it to set that way so that it will hold that shape or hold the block. And the block is just, I think it's kind of like squaring up the edges. I honestly don't know where block originated, but that is the term that knitters use for taking your piece after you've knitted it and then putting it flat and making it be in the shape that you want it to be. It is a term knitters use that if someone else was listening, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Frog. Another word. Everybody knows that what a frog means, right? Well, in knitting, frog or to frog or frogging means that you have taken your yarn, that your project that you were working on, pulled your needle all the way out, and then just started pulling on this yarn and popping all your stitches out. And the reason where frogging came from is because it's also called ripping. And when you're pulling the yarn out, you rip it, rip it, rip it, or ribbit, rip it. You're ripping it out or frogging your project, which means you've taken the needle out and you're just pulling those stitches out willy-nilly. Now, ancillary or words that go with it are saying that you've put a project into the frog pond, which means it's the pile of projects that need to be pulled out, and yet you have not quite gotten up the gumption to do so. Frogging can be partial, or you can frog a project entirely, which means pulling out your needles and just rip, and in the end, you have just a ball of yarn. And you're ready to knit something else. So frog or frogging means the same thing as rip, and you are pulling out your stitches. Frog or frogging leads naturally to tink. Now, tink or tinking is similar to frogging in that you are removing stitches, but instead of pulling out your needle and just pulling on the yarn and going pop, 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 tinking is literally taking your yarn, inserting your needle into the stitch below the stitch on your needle, and then popping out one stitch. And then you insert your needle, pop out the next stitch. Insert the needle, pop out the next stitch. It is removing stitches from your project one stitch at a time using your needles. Tink is literally knit spelled backwards. You are unknitting or knitting backwards, if you will. So when you unknit, when you knit backwards, you are tinking. So tink. There we go. Tink. It is a much more arduous process than frogging. But sometimes you only need to go back a few stitches. Sometimes you have to go back a few rows. Nobody likes doing that. But you simply have to tink, and you get your stitches off of your needle. So tinking, frogging, not words that we like, but ones that I don't know about you, I use with more frequency than I would like to admit. Okay, that is 4 that we've discussed. I don't know how many fingers you have up. I hope you've been marking off if you got them correct or not. And if you didn't, it's no big deal. You learned something. So, number 5, LYS stands for, we're into acronym land. The rest of them are acronyms. LYS stands for Local Yarn Store. One of my favorite places to be. It is, LYS or Local Yarn Store is used to differentiate a small, usually privately owned, small business that is dedicated to selling yarn and fiber accessories from other places where you can get yarn, such as what is called a big box store, but that's used everywhere, like a Michael's. I almost said Margaret's because I was trying to put Michael's and Target together and it came out Margaret. Michael's, sometimes Target has yarn. Well, they used to. Joann's, Walmart occasionally has yarn. Stores that are crafting stores that aren't dedicated yarn stores, they're great places to get yarn, but they're not what's called a local yarn store, because the local yarn is that it's local to you, it's locally owned, and it predominantly sells yarn. Now, they can sell other things that fiber enthusiasts like. Like weaving stuff and crochet stuff. And, crochet goes with yarn, so that was silly of me. But embroidery stuff, all the things that go with your yarn activities. And those are some of the most fun ones to go into, even spinning wheels, so you can make your own yarn. But LYS stands for Local Yarn Store. And the super fun thing is, with what's going on in the world right now, a lot of our local yarn stores are putting a lot of effort into creating online presences. So they're still local yarn stores because they're still small, and owned by just a small business, and they still sell yarn. It's just their store is online. So your local yarn store might not necessarily be local to you, but it's local to somebody. Still a small store, and we love to support them. So you could be up to 5 now. How many fingers you're holding up, or have you ticked off? Next one. KAL stands for knit along. Now, there's also, you could do CAL, which would stand for craft along, or crochet along, depending on what kind of activity it is. But a knit along is typically when a group of individuals choose the same pattern to all knit together. And one of the wonderful things about a knit along is that as you're facing challenges working through a pattern, since you're facing them together, you can help each other. Or if someone is a little ahead and they've already faced that challenge, someone else, they can help them if they run into the same issue, or you can warn them about the same issue. But it's super fun because you start off and y'all get to choose yarns together and show each other the yarns you're going to use and talk about, like, I have these options, and they can give you opinions on which ones they think are going to work better. And it's just a fun group activity because you can watch each other's grow and see what their yarn choices were, and just, have that participation kind of thing. Knit-alongs can be in just with your local knitting group. They can be through your local store. They can be online. There are a lot of computer-based knit-alongs that are super fun. So KAL stands for knit-along. Okay, that was number 6. I bet a lot of you have 6 fingers up right now. We're going to move on to... This one might be a little curveball. It is not quite as commonly used. KIP, knit in public. Hey, I KIP the other day. It's when someone actually takes their knitting out on the road and is knitting in public. You might be sitting on a bench in a park. You might be in your house of worship. You might be at a movie theater. I know people that can knit in the dark, and they knit in public. They KIP in the dark in movie theaters. Any place that is public that you can knit in public on the beach. And what knitting in public is it's kind of like wearing our badge and showing everyone this is a super fun thing to do. I know people who do it on like public transportation, on buses. It's a way to maybe meet like-minded people. And there is actually every year a knit in public day where local yarn stores and groups of knitters get together and all go to one place and knit in public together. So you see this mass of knitters and it's super fun. And it's a way of sort of recruiting into our particular form of having fun. I have seen knit in public days at baseball games where a knitting guild will get a whole block of seats at either a minor or major league team, and you'll have a whole block of knitters sitting and knitting in public at the baseball game, which is super fun. And you get to, listen, sort of watch to baseball. Baseball is not one of those sports that requires 100% of your focus 100% of the time. So another fun acronym, KIP. So that is number 7. Very similar, not KIP, but WIP. And it means something completely different. WIP means work in progress. It is your project while you are working on it, while it is still on the needles and you haven't quite finished it. So you're working on a whip. Or you can say, I've got a lot of whips in a pile. I know people who are like that. A whip can be at any stage of development. A whip could be you've selected your yarn and your needles and maybe cast on, all the way up to you have completely finished all the knitting for the garment, but you have not yet blocked it and assembled it. It's still a work in progress. If you haven't woven in those ends, may still be a whip. I know people who wear whips. I've seen people wearing a piece like when you go to like a Stitches or a big event that still has the needle in it because they got that close. So WIP stands for work in progress, a whip. And that was number 8. Here's number 9. UFO. Now UFO, another one of those terms that means one specific thing to 100% of the population, but in the knitting world means something completely different. UFO means unfinished object. It's kind of the same as work in progress. So a whip and a UFO, they're kind of the same thing, but they're two very different words, and both can refer, as I said, a whip could be at any stage. UFOs tend to be more of the example I used at the end of the last one. All the knitting is done, you just haven't put it together yet. That tends to be more the UFO stage of things. But a WIP and UFO, whip and UFO can be used pretty much interchangeably. Their two words kind of mean the same thing, but they are both fun, and I didn't want to leave either out. And here we go. The last one, the one that if you've gotten all 9 up to here, this is one I think might trip some people up. SABLE. SABLE. It is an acronym, and it is used among more seasoned knitters, and it stands for Stash Acquisition Beyond Life Expectancy. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. Stash acquisition beyond life expectancy. What that means is that you have acquired so much yarn over your knitting career that you have more yarn. Even if you started knitting right now and knit every single day as much as you could for the rest of your life, you would not work your way through your stash. It's a joke. It really is something, a word that people use to indicate that they have a lot of yarn and they've collected a lot of yarn, and it's a joking kind of thing. I know people who feel that they have reached Sable, and then they acquire other yarn-based hobbies. Weaving choose through yarn, and it might reduce that stash. I know people who have sable in fingering or sock weight yarn, and they get a circular knitting machine, a sock machine, where you can knit. You got a crank that you turn, and you can blow through the puppy really fast. There are things you can do to reduce your stash if you want to, but I personally have always felt that, I don't know always, but have come to feel that your yarn crafting hobby, be it knitting, crocheting, weaving, whatever, and collecting yarn are actually two different hobbies. And you know what? People collect shiny rocks. People collect little figurines. People collect all kinds of things because they are beautiful and they bring them joy in some way. And if what brings you joy is collecting beautiful yarn and having it in your life, and if simply having that yarn makes you happy, then I see absolutely nothing wrong with that. My husband collects models, like the models that you build. They're all in boxes. They very rarely get built because he doesn't have a lot of time, but simply having those models. I mean, I don't know how many different models of the Starship Enterprise that a single individual needs, but who am I to judge? If it makes him happy, it makes him happy. So the sable is one of those kind of joke ones, but I wanted y'all to know, if you ran across it, what it means. So those are our 10 secret language of knitting that we went over today. I would love to hear in the comments how many you got right. As I said, I bet a bunch of you got 10. I'd be interested if any of these were new to some of you. I find them incredibly fun. So what we have is cake, block, frog, tink, LYS, KAL, KIP, WIP, UFO, and sable. It really is secret language, where it's like sort of like the whole pig Latin kind of situation. And as I mentioned before, because it just popped into my brain, knitting puns. If you got good knitting puns, let me know in the comments below. Well, I enjoyed this video. I hope y'all did. If you did, please click that like button, give it the thumbs up. And if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.